Toxic effects of gases. In this module, you will learn more about gases and their effect on the human body. Discover that oxygen can also be harmful, find out what rapture of the deep really is, and learn the possible consequences of the effects of gases in diving and what we can use to prevent them. Partial pressure. Up to now we have spoken about the aqualung, taking for granted that the cylinder actually contains air. In fact, this is not always the case, but usually at the beginning of your diving career your cylinders will contain only air. But what is this common and precious element that is essential to our existence? This matter, commonly known as air, is not actually a single element, but it is a mixture of different gases. Oxygen, nitrogen, and traces of other gases. In dry air, without water vapor, these gases are present in different percentages. About 21% is oxygen, about 78% is nitrogen, and the remaining 1% is made up of other gases. Nitrogen and the other gases play no part in our body's metabolism and are therefore referred to as inert gases. In order to assess the influence these gases have on our bodies, it is not sufficient to refer just to the percentage of the gas. Many of the effects that they can produce are proportional to the pressure at which the gas is breathed. Therefore, it is necessary to introduce a new concept that takes into account both these factors. This is the partial pressure. In a mixture of gas at a given pressure, the partial pressure of one specific component is that which a gas would have if it occupied the same volume of the entire gas mixture alone. Luckily, it is very easy to calculate the partial pressure. It is a percentage of the absolute pressure equal to the percentage of the gas. For example, the percentage of oxygen in air is 21%. So, if air is at an absolute pressure of 1 atmosphere, the partial pressure of oxygen is 21% of 1 atm, which is 0.21 atm. As we dive under the water, the absolute pressure increases. At 10 meters, 33 feet, the absolute pressure is equal to 2 atm. Therefore, the partial pressure of oxygen is 21% of 2 atm, which is 0.42 atm. Limits of oxygen. Among the components of air, oxygen is the only gas that is indispensable to our metabolism. So why don't we just fill our diving cylinders with oxygen? The answer is that our bodies can only tolerate partial pressures of oxygen within a well-defined range. Above or below these limits, this gas can cause problems. A partial pressure of oxygen lower than 0.14 atm, a situation known as hypoxia, does not allow our bodies to function properly. On the other hand, breathing oxygen at a partial pressure higher than 1.4 atm, a situation known as hyperoxia, could cause, even in just a short time, convulsions, which could obviously be extremely dangerous underwater. Therefore, if we breathe pure oxygen, in order to keep the partial pressure below 1.4 atm, we could not exceed 4 meters 13 feet in depth. Instead, if we breathe air, this level is reached at a depth of 56 meters 184 feet, well beyond the maximum limits of recreational diving. Contrary to their name, inert gases also have significant effects on the human body. Breathing high partial pressures of nitrogen has a narcotic and euphoric effect on the diver, causing a loss of dexterity and a slowing down of the cerebral processes. The phenomenon, nitrogen narcosis, is very similar to the effect caused by drinking alcohol, with the euphoria concealing a mental dimming. Cousteau, one of the pioneers of modern diving, called this phenomenon the martini effect. His opinion was that the diver behaves as if he has drunk a martini cocktail for every 10 meters, 33 feet, he dives under the water. Nitrogen narcosis is often referred to as the rapture of the deep. Divers suffering from this condition may put themselves in dangerous situations without realizing. By limiting your dives to within 20 meters, 66 feet, you will have no problems with nitrogen narcosis. If you do feel any symptoms, just ascend a few meters and the narcotic effect will begin to pass and then completely disappear. Contaminated air. Up to now, we have examined air, taking for granted that this gas mixture is pure. In fact, the air we breathe underwater is taken from the environment and pumped into the cylinders by a compressor. Despite the fact that compressors have a good filtering system, some contaminants may get into your diving cylinder. For example, if the air is badly polluted by city smog or exhaust fumes, it may contain carbon monoxide, a gas which compressor filters cannot eliminate. Although this polluted air can be breathed without immediate problems on the surface, breathing the same air at depth, where the partial pressure of any carbon monoxide in the air would increase, could have very dangerous consequences. Another contaminant could be produced by traces of the compressor's lubricating oil that can accumulate inside the cylinder, contaminating the compressed air and giving it a bad taste or smell. You can check for this by making a simple test. Open the cylinder valve slightly for a couple of seconds while holding a paper handkerchief in front. If the handkerchief has a bad smell, the air inside the cylinder is contaminated. However, if while you are diving you realize that the air tastes bad, you feel nauseous, dizzy, or get a headache, ascend to the surface, following the correct procedures, and breathe fresh air. Solubility of gases in liquids. Let's now look at the relationship between gases and liquids. When a gas is in contact with the surface of a liquid, some of the gas molecules pass through and diffuse into the liquid, becoming a solution, just like sugar dissolving in water. The quantity of molecules that pass from a gas into a liquid depends on various factors, such as time, temperature, pressure, and the solubility coefficient. Solubility is the maximum number of molecules of a given gas that can dissolve in a particular liquid. When this level has been reached, the number of gas molecules in the liquid cannot increase. It is said that the liquid has reached saturation. The solubility of gas is not constant. For example, it increases if the pressure increases or if the temperature decreases. In fact, by increasing the pressure, more gas molecules pass into the liquid until saturation is reached for this new condition of pressure. If, however, we decrease the pressure, the gas molecules in excess are forced to abandon the liquid. An everyday example of this is a bottle of sparkling mineral water in which a gas, carbon dioxide, is dissolved in the water. Because the bottle is closed under pressure, when we open it the pressure falls suddenly and the excess gas molecules come out of the water, collecting together to form bubbles. A warm bottle will make more bubbles than a cold one because solubility increases when the temperature decreases. You will notice that if the top is opened slowly, less bubbles form. But how does all this influence diving? Our body is made up of tissues that absorb in gas and release off gas during the descent and ascent phases of the dive. Therefore, we should look a little more closely. Decompression sickness. The tissues of a diver behave like a bottle of mineral water. If decompression occurs too rapidly, the molecules of inert gas are released quickly and they could collect together to form bubbles. If the bubbles stay microscopic in size, they do not cause us any problems, and they are defined as silent or asymptomatic bubbles. But if they increase in volume and collect together, these bubbles can become big enough to obstruct a blood vessel and block the blood flow to some parts of the body. This condition is commonly known as embolism or decompression sickness. There are various types of decompression sickness, or DCS, more or less serious, depending on the tissue or organ affected. There are various and numerous signs and symptoms of decompression sickness: fatigue, swelling, painful joints, itching, skin rashes, back pain, pins and needles, difficulty in urinating, paralysis, disturbances to the sight, hemiparesis, choking, breathlessness, etc. There are also many individual factors that increase the risk of decompression sickness: age, smoking, obesity, illness, wounds or other injuries, alcohol, drugs or medication before diving. If decompression sickness is suspected, oxygen should be breathed on the surface for at least 1 to 2 hours. If oxygen treatment is not sufficient, the diver should be transported urgently to the nearest available hyperbaric chamber to be recompressed. However, in all cases of suspected decompression sickness, the nearest hyperbaric facility or medical diving organization should be contacted immediately, and the instructions given by the medical personnel should be followed carefully. Preventing decompression sickness. Today, particularly thanks to the use of diving computers, the risk of suffering from decompression sickness is very low. In the past, this condition interested hard hat divers and the caisson workers who worked underwater in pressurized metal caissons. The first studies that partially solved these problems date to the early 1900s, with the theory drafted by the Scottish physiologist Haldane. The theory was based on a mathematical simulation of the absorption and release of gas, and the only variable was the rate of diffusion. In the second half of the 1900s, the US Navy carried out practical experiments on American divers based on Haldane's theory. As a result, dive tables were drafted up, and these tables were later adopted by recreational divers all over the world. The first dive computers, made on the basis of these studies, further increased the safety of divers. Recently, new scientific models have been developed that also take into consideration inert gas present in the form of microbubbles, studying their form and growth. These new models, still being researched, considerably increase the safety margins of diving. The best way to prevent decompression sickness is therefore to always use a dive computer, respect the depth limits, the rate of descent and ascent, and keep up to date on developments in this field. In the next module, you will learn how to use the dive tables, find out how to use a dive computer, learn some more important safety procedures, and examine what to do to prevent decompression sickness in particular situations. Until the next time.